All right, welcome to KBFT Virtual Music Fest interview sponsored by KBFT 89.9 FM, Boys Fort Tribal Radio, and the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. And today we're here with Samantha Crain. She's a singer, songwriter, poet, producer, musician from the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. She is a two-time Native American Music Award winner and a winner of Indigenous Music Award. And we're here to talk about her upcoming performance for KBFT Virtual Music Fest here Saturday, May 18th, 7 p.m. Again on KBFT Facebook Live. And welcome to the show, Samantha, and thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so how did your music career begin?
Well, I guess the career part of it kind of just came not too long after I started writing, honestly. I think the youthful naivety of like starting something new sometimes gives you a little push into like not realizing maybe that you need to get better before you start a career at it. But for me, it just kind of like all happened at once. When I was in high school, I would go to this like DIY sort of all ages music venue in Oklahoma City, which was sort of like the big city around the central Oklahoma. And I went because I hadn't really like found any sort of like group that I fit into or like particular things that I liked doing. I was just sort of floating along like in my small sort of community and my small school that I went to. And I went to these shows feeling like I was making some sort of like connection with some people that had like similar interests and things like that. And I just saw these bands that were like not too much older than me that were pulling up, in the back of a venue in like a van, like broken down van, and just like pouring out and playing for 30 people and then getting back in and going to another city and doing that. And I think that was the first time I really had ever like understood that that was a thing that people did, that people traveled around and played music. And one of those shows that I went to, there was a record store next door, and I would kind of go in and browse CDs before the show started. And a lot of times I would like pick CDs just based on like cover art if I thought it looked good. Because I was just like very entry level, like didn't know much about music or anything. And I just like picked up a CD once and listened to it on the way home. It was called The Lioness, and it's by this band called Songs Ohio, which was a Jason Molina project. And it just really struck me because, I mean, I loved the songs and the songs were really beautiful to me, but the fact that it was just like him and a guitar and like some like cheap drum machine that sounded like you could get it off eBay or something like that. It just seemed like really accessible to me. Like it didn't seem that uh that difficult of like something to try. And so I just was kind of sold like on this idea of writing songs and figuring out how I could make a living just driving around and playing them for people. And back then you could just like send MySpace messages to venues and send them like a recording that you made. And if they liked you, they'd book you. I mean, things are a lot different now. It's a lot more involved now, but it was sort of like the golden age of like indie rock and like singer songwriter DIY sort of culture where you could just sort of figure out how to book shows yourself, and it was like pretty accessible to do, I think. So that's what I did. I just sort of wrote some songs, made sort of bedroom recordings of them, and just started traveling around and playing at coffee shops and things like that. And I mean, things like kind of progressed from there, but that was the beginning of it.
Nice. That's a good story. I like how you tied in a bunch of different elements that kind of go along with music, you know, like how you where you chose certain music just by their art, you know, and I used to do that too, like not even knowing what the band was. I would just, if I liked the cover art of it, it kind of piqued my curiosity, so I had to buy it, you know. I was like, just to find out what was inside. And
Yeah.
you could be pleasantly surprised by what you buy and what you can find out there. um, and um, and how you described like these musicians um, pulling up in these not the best vehicles, but yeah, I mean, yeah, if you find your passion, I mean, you'll do it. You'll make it happen no matter what you have. And and uh, you just have to work towards it, and that's what you've done for yourself, you know. Because now, like, your music is pretty amazing, you know. And I can, you said earlier that you know um, you're listening to like a lot of lo-fi, and so uh, how did that transition kind of start for you? Um, was it like, I mean, like, your music is it's pretty amazing, and it has just awesome production. And do you do a lot of the producing yourself? And how did you learn, and or what made you progress as a musician, as a producer?
I think it's just been like a really natural, like, I mean, and slow process of just meeting people along the way and learning from people as I've gone along. I've always been kind of like an autodidact. Like I just not I don't do well like in traditional educational settings. I do better if I can just like teach myself, like watch a YouTube video or read a book and then kind of figure it out. And I feel like that's kind of always how I've worked. I kind of get like I get the gist of it, and then I'm just like, okay, I'll see what I can do with those, like those tools. And so, you know, thinking about what my recording sounded like when I first started, when I was like 18, as opposed to now, there is quite like a stark difference in the production quality, but I think it's been kind of like a slow rise. And also me like exploring a lot in there as well, which I think is like I think really important for like a long-term career artist, somebody that wants to like make things for the rest of their life, to be able to like kind of meander around your craft and what you're creating and like try different things, figure out what works, what doesn't. um, I've worked with a lot of different producers in the past where I've had like and I've learned a lot from them in terms of like ideas for how things should sound. Or I've worked with producers where I've decided I don't want anything to sound like that ever again. I've learned what mics work best on my voice. I've learned like what guitars sound best on a recording. I've learned arrangement wise like what works best on an album, and it'll be like a continuous process for the rest of my record making life. But yes, I have started doing more production myself, like especially on my last two releases. I produced both of those just myself, but I feel like I would have only been able to get to that point um like after having gone through all of the experiences I've had with other producers like Danny Kadar and John Vanderslice and my friend Joey Lemon. So I think being able to like take what I've learned from them and then apply it to my own voice as a producer has been a really interesting and fun process to get to the point where like I feel like I understand it well enough to make my own like production and arrangement decisions.
Nice. Yeah, and you've been really, really super busy with music. Um, let's talk about the catalog. You have 9 albums out now, and you just released one this year. And let's talk a little bit about that. I guess We Live Here Now is the title of your newest record, and we can find that on your website at samanthacrain.com.
Yeah, so it's an EP, so it's like a short album, not like a full-length album. I released a full-length album called A Small Death last year, during the summer. And then after I finished that record, um, I was sort of set to just be touring that year. Like that was what you do. You put a record out and you tour. And so I wasn't really planning on recording or writing anything for a minute. But then as like the pandemic kind of continued and kept going, I sort of just had all this time to reflect on kind of the person that I was going to be after a small death. Like I had dealt with all this really heavy stuff on a small death that I had experienced personally, and but then also discovered like so many tools of survival, and had made it through so much, and was just sort of like thinking about the aftermath of that. And these 4 songs just sort of came out of my um, having all of this time to think since I wasn't touring. They're sort of an expression of myself, I think, increasingly um, at peace with uncertainties and just finding more agency over my own decisions. Um, it's kind of like I kind of view it as like there's this worst case scenario letter, which was a small death, like just like the worst thing that you could possibly think of had happened, and then it's over, and a breath is sort of like taken and relief is sighed, and then this thought enters your mind that there is no unbearable burden if you are still alive. And that's what the EP, I think that's the voice that the EP is coming from. And so since I had the time at home, I went ahead and recorded it and put it out in April.
Congratulations on releasing that album, and I'm looking forward to listening to it in its entirety. Um, you talk about playing live. What are the most memorable shows you've done in the past?
I so many to like comb through in my head, and that's feels like an impossible question almost, because there's just so many of them um, that I've played over the past 14 years. I think one that kind of comes to my mind right off the bat is a show that I played in Copenhagen at a venue. I think it was called Vega. I'd never played in Copenhagen. This would have been probably like 4 or 5 years ago, I think. I'd never played there. And anytime you go to a city that you've never played, it's always kind of a weird feeling because you don't know what to expect. You don't know if anybody in that city has ever even heard of you or anything that you've done. And so, especially whenever you're like by yourself in a foreign country, that kind of amplifies that feeling of nervousness, I think, a little bit. But I went into this really beautiful venue. It was sort of, it's hard to explain. It was just like all wood everywhere. Like they had these like slats of wood had been carved out everywhere. And it was a small, like intimate venue, like maybe 200 people could fit in. But I got there and I sort of like set my stuff up on the stage, and had stepped out for a bit, probably to grab dinner or something, and I come back in and it's just completely full and everybody is sitting on the ground and like sort of, right up on the stage, like right up as close as they can and just like ready to just have like a really nice experience. And it just felt like one of those moments where I felt really lucky to be doing what I was doing, which was just like writing these songs and like attempting to make connections with people, and that the people that had come to that show were just like 100% in it to like receive whatever it was that I was going to get on stage and do. And it just felt like a really special night just to show up in a city that I had never been to and have, these people that were so attentive and just ready to like have a really special night. So that's like a really cool moment. And I have started like in the past couple of years kind of moving out of the club scene, like rock venues and things like that, and started doing a lot more like house shows. And those always feel really special to me for that same reason. Like it's that same experience, it's that same feeling of people knowing that they're there to like have an experience, and like that whatever's going to happen in that place is never going to happen ever again. And so I think, yeah, those kind of shows feel really special to me.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. And what about this upcoming virtual show you have for KBFT? Have you ever done any virtual shows, or is this your first one?
I've done a couple, but I have steered away from them mainly just because I like kind of what I was just talking about. Like, I love being able to have that like shared space with other people. But there comes a point where I just miss playing, and like I want to be able to connect with people so badly that sometimes like virtually is the only way to do it, I guess. So hopefully it'll feel like as much like one of these really intimate house shows as what it would be like if I was actually there. So that's sort of my goal, is to just make it as, I think, intimate as possible as we can get on a virtual platform.
Awesome. We're really excited to have you on, and thank you so much for signing up for this virtual performance for us. And we're really excited at the station. And yeah, I just want one more question. Do you have any words of encouragement to any future musicians, young musicians, upcoming artists?
I think, I mean, the only like words of wisdom or advice is I would just say to always like check back in with yourself and like who you are, and not get, I think, too caught up in like what everyone else is doing and like trying to mimic that or anything. Like, I think the only time that artists like really succeed, and I don't just mean like with money or fan base success, I just mean like succeed in life, like in like getting joy from making something, and then being able to receive that joy back from people that are listening to their music, is whenever they're just being like their truest self. And I think that a lot of roadblocks for me, just in my journey as a musician, was kind of getting caught up a lot in like paying too much attention to what other bands or other artists were doing, instead of just like focusing on my own work. And I mean, luckily I don't feel like I'm in a spot where that's like a road bump for me right now. But I know like when I was younger, I would just say, don't pay attention to anyone else and just kind of like do the thing that feels right to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for chatting with us, Samantha. And again, if you're just tuning in, please catch Samantha Crain live this Saturday, May 26th May 22nd, 7 p.m. here on KBFT Facebook Live. And again, we're looking forward to the show, Samantha. We will see you this weekend.
Great. Looking forward.